So we're going to dive right in. I've got a lot of different things we're going to share today. First things first, user settings. So there are all different kinds of settings that each user can make changes to make their Sage 100 more efficient. Things like using the Enter key like a tab key, implying decimal points, displaying reduction amounts in red, and changing your default report preview zoom size. So that last one is actually my favorite of this. Having that, changing that default report preview. When you run any standard report out of Sage, it defaults to just 100%. And I think some of you may have found that that's pretty small. It's actually really small. By changing that default report preview zoom, every time you open a report, it's going to open in 150%, 200%, something like that, and give you that bigger picture of the report without having to change it every single time. For this next part here, I'm going to actually come over to the software and show you this. We're going to kind of flap back and forth as I do the presentation here. So if I open up my Sage 100, we have this View tab over here. And on our View tab, we have a bunch of different options that can help you to better customize the software for your own uses. The first one I want to show, this is one that actually gets a lot of people really excited. This is our application scaling. So you can see the font or the size of the font over here is, it's okay. It's relatively small, but we have the option to change our application scaling, which changes the size of the font, and then also changes the size of the windows that open and the font of the windows that open, as you can see here. This is all based around your screen resolution. So you can see that if you don't have, a giant screen, you won't be able to select the large or extra large format. You may only have access to default or medium. So that's going to be related to your screen resolution. We also have the ability to sort our module lists, module menus, and module menu tasks. So watch over here on the left as I sort the module list. Pretty straightforward. It's made it alphabetical. But something that I like to point out to folks as they consider doing this is that the system does try to put things in a somewhat logical order. So if I unsort here, you can see we've got library master up at the top. We've got a couple usability things. We get general ledger. Then we get accounts receivable, accounts payable, then inventory, then sales order, purchase order, and then all of our production modules. So, keep in mind that Sage does try to give us that logical format, that logical layout to the modules, as well as to the tasks within the modules. So let me give you an example here under customer or under accounts receivable. So we've got, if I choose to sort the menu tasks, it's sorting it alphabetically, and that's great. But this layout here is a pretty straightforward, pretty logical format. We've got our customer setup. We've got some inquiries, repetitive invoices. We've got our invoice data entry, then printing, then our sales journal. Then we have to pay it. So cash receipts or get paid for it, cash receipts and cash receipts journal. So it does try to set this up in a logical manner. I just noticed there is a question, what version this is. This is the 2021 version, and that would have become obvious when I got to the next slide here, because I'm going to show you guys a ton of 2021 version features as we go through this. Okay. Another thing that we can do with our view is we can change our theme and colors for our screen. So you can see over here, we've got a whole bunch of different pre-formatted themes. And this changes kind of the background, maybe makes it, this is like a pretty stark white, very bright. Maybe you like a little bit darker of a screen. It's a little easier for you to see. So you can choose all of these different options and figure out what's going to work best for you. I'm going to go back to my regular plain sage green because that is what I'm used to, I guess, at this point. The one other feature I want to show you here is toolbar mode. Some people really love toolbar mode. Personally, I'm not a huge fan. I want to see more stuff, but I want to show that it is possible to change to toolbar mode. You can see my PowerPoint in the background here, but it minimizes this down to just a tiny little toolbar. I don't like it. I'm going back to my big old Sage. All right. So here's where we start to look at some of the cool 2021 features, as well as just some like goofy, tiny little tips and tricks. So number one, in the 2021 version, we can now choose what field prints at the bottom of all of our reports to identify our user. So I'm going to show that to you here. If we come to Library Master, System Configuration, this is under our Preferences tab. So what we're choosing here is when we print a report, what's the user display option that we want to show? We can choose the user logon. This is going to be the logon you use to log into Sage. The person's name, which comes up under your user maintenance. The user code, which is what has traditionally been used for everything, or the email address. I've got this set to name, so let me show you what that looks like on a report. I'm just going to run a quick and easy chart of accounts. And if I pull this over here, if I scroll down to the bottom, you can see that the user logon lists Jesse Braun, my full name. Previously, this would have been just the user code that exists, and that can be kind of confusing because, it's just somebody's initials or, that kind of thing. Okay. A couple of really tiny, but maybe somebody out there doesn't know, improves the quality of life using your software. In fact, these next two tips and tricks came from a couple of clients who I thought, oh, everybody knows this, no big deal. But no, turns out, no, they don't. And I thought, gosh, I better mention it. This is exactly the kind of thing that people want to see. So when you're logging into your Sage for the first time, hit enter twice. So tiny, so goofy. But I had somebody say to me, yeah, gosh, this is so frustrating. Every time I go to log in, I type in my thing and I hit enter and nothing happens. I have to take my mouse and click OK. And I told them, yeah, if you hit enter twice, it will let you log in. And they said, oh, that's incredible. It's going to make my daily life so much better. Again, tiny, goofy, but that's the kind of thing that, if you don't know it, you just don't know it, and it's good to share here. Another tiny little thing that's been around for a long time is the ability to open in a secondary company. So I'm going to show you an example here. If we were coming to item maintenance, you can see I'm in my ABC company. But if I come to item maintenance and just single click, on the left mouse, sure, it's going to open item maintenance. But if I right click, we can choose to open this with a secondary company. We can even go say, I want to choose a new secondary company. I'm going to make the XYZ company my new secondary company. And when I come to item maintenance, open with XYZ company, it's going to open that task within the XYZ company. But you can see that down below, I'm still in the ABC company. This is great for reference. This is great for, if you're trying to do setup based on a test company versus a live company, tons of different ways that you can use this. And just another tiny little tip and trick that, if you didn't know, you didn't know. One thing that hopefully isn't going to break too many hearts, but I do want to let everybody know, the classic view of Sage is obsolete as of the 2020 version. So you can see down here, this is what that used to look like. It was the tree format. You click the plus button and it opens everything up. So as of the 2020 version, the classic view is no longer available. I think there is a little bit of a like hitch that some people were allowed to keep it if they had the classic view when they upgraded. But I would not bank on that. I believe, that is, if you have that tiny little workaround somehow, it's going to go away and you won't be able to use the classic view. So great time to get used to our standard view in Sage. Let's talk a little bit about user and role security. So as of the 2021 version, they made some major improvements to user and role security that makes setting up your security and understanding, who has what roles easier than ever. So if you've been thinking about doing an overhaul of your role security, moving to the 2021 version first, it might be a good idea for you guys. Let's take a look at some of the user and role security features. So in the library master module, it used to be we would find user maintenance and role maintenance up here under the main menu. They've actually given us an entire security menu now, which is really, really nice. Having all of this sort of together and succinct, really important. So security is on the separate menu. When we open up our role maintenance, we have a lot of new features here that weren't there before. So I'm just going to pull up my all access role. And you can see, first of all, we have the ability to set a role type. At this point, all this is a label. All this does is just say, okay, well, this role type, it's a sales role, it's a warehouse role. They don't have any default like roles that can be set up and say, well, if it's a sales role, I think it should have access to this. But I am pretty sure that's something that will be coming down the line, that this is laying the base work for that to kind of be put in place. So we have the ability to set that role type. We also have the ability here to assign roles to multiple users at once within the role. So if I come to this Assign tab, you can see that we can choose a company. We can choose a start or an expiration date. And then we can move multiple users into that role just by clicking the left and right buttons. You can see I don't have very much. This is a test company. Obviously, not a whole lot of users set up. But if you're doing that overhaul of your security, this can be a really easy way to, get everybody assigned to the correct thing at the same time. We also have the ability to search and sort within our role maintenance to try and figure out, what it is we want to set everything up as. Under the tasks, this is just set up as alphabetical. We can set it to the default menu order, but alphabetical probably makes sense. But under security options is where this gets a little bit cool. So, to start, we have security options by module, and it's just a list. It's just a long list. But if we set it to group, we can see that this groups our security options by kind of type, right? So anything related to batches. So are they allowed to access private batches? Can they merge batches? Anything related to data entry. This is one of the cool new ways that they've made it easier for you to figure out how best to set up those security options within your Sage. Another thing that we have the ability to do is import and export roles. Again, that's a new thing, and will come into play, I think, if you're working with us with your reseller on, properly setting all of that up. We may be able to do an import or an export to set it out in a grid and then bring it into the system for you. So for right now, not too exciting on the import export, but I think that may be where Sage utilizes things in the future. And yeah. So let's move on from user and role security and talk about company colors. So if you have multiple companies in the system, this is a feature that's been around for a long time. We have this ability to set a color background either to the frame or to the full background screen of your particular companies. So let's say you have a test company, you want to make sure you don't accidentally enter live transactions into your test company. You can set a background color. So to do that, we come up to company maintenance. I'm just going to pull up my ABC company, come to my theme. We must set the theme code to classic so that we can get to this company specific background. So instead of doing background, I'm going to do the frame. The frame is just going to be the part around the outside. And we're going to choose a color. I'm going to go with a bright aspirational blue so that, you know, we can all hope for the blue skies coming forward here. And if I open up like customer maintenance, for example, you can see that that company code now has that background color. Okay. So adding the colors to the background is pretty nice, pretty cool. I'm going to switch that back really quickly so that for the rest of the demo, we're not looking at that. All right. So in addition to company colors, I'm going to show you another new 2021 feature, which is the ability to label a company. This has been something long time coming that is pretty cool. So over here in our company maintenance, you'll notice a new dropdown that allows us to set the company type. We can choose a live, archive, demo, or test. So what does this do for us? Live and archive companies, it will restrict copying over of live and archive companies unless you have proper security settings. So you can really restrict this down so that nobody can accidentally copy over your live or your archive data. Demo and test, it just is another way to label that and kind of help you. I mean, you can see that it's telling us this is a demo company all over the place. So as you're working within the system, it kind of gives you that heads up, okay, you're in test. Just another way to try and mark something as being, you know, that other company, the one that you don't want to, you know, do your live transactions in. So there you go. Favorites. This is an oldie but a goodie. Having favorites really helps you organize your Sage and organize the tasks that you do on a daily basis. We can add folders, categories, separators, and I love to use this as a process flow. And I'm going to show you how I kind of set this up within the Sage software. So over here on the left, you can see we've got this favorites tab. If I come to my favorites, you'll see we have a whole bunch of stuff already set up. We can right click within this space. We can insert a folder. Sometimes it's nice to have that folder as just a label, but it doesn't have to be that way. You can actually put things within the folder as well. We can do shortcuts. This can be to outside things. So if you had a shortcut to, you know, your credit card processor website and you want to keep that in here as part of your, you know, end of day cash reconciliation process, you can insert that shortcut, use that as a process flow. The separators are these little lines right here. It just helps us to differentiate between all of the different processes. And then as far as, you know, setting up your favorites, there's a couple different ways to do it. We can right click, add to favorites, or we can just drag and drop. And we can move stuff around that way too. Setting up your favorites is super easy. And again, it's a really nice way just to, you know, organize your work, organize your processes, and really think about what it is that you need to access on a daily basis. Here is a really cool one for 2021 that I love. So at my previous company, this was an issue that we had quite a bit. We had multiple different form codes for different tasks. And because they were using a shared IT environment, when one person switched the form code, it switched everybody's form code. Now, granted, this was on a much older version. Things have, you know, gotten better over time, but the Sage 100 in 2021 now allows us to set default form codes by role or by user, and we can lock it so that we can say, this user is not allowed to change the sales order invoice printing form. I want them to always use this one. Let me show you that here in the system. So if we come to our setup menu under Library Master, we can come to Default Form Maintenance. We'll choose our company. We can either choose a role or a specific user. So let's choose this user. We can say for this user, I want their AP check printing to use the standard form code. Again, this is a test system. I don't have other form codes in here, but I think you guys get the idea. We can say, I want them to use this form code by default, but maybe I'm not going to lock the AP check printing. I'm going to allow them to make that change on the AP check printing. But with sales order invoice printing, they have to use this form. They can't use any other form. I'm going to lock it. I really think default form maintenance is one of the coolest things that they've added to the 2021 version, which is kind of saying a lot because there were some pretty cool features for 2021. And here's the next coolest feature in 2021. In our inventory maintenance, we now have the ability to default date range in our transactions. So this has been an issue for, I think, as long as I can remember. When you go into inventory management, we come over to item maintenance. And when you used to go to your transactions tab, you'd have to click the little binoculars and clear out the dates that were in there because it always defaulted to whatever your current period was in. Not everybody closes their periods in a super timely basis. And really, wouldn't you want to see a whole bunch more information? Well, Sage in 2021 added the ability to set a default selection range. So if we come to inventory management options, additional, you can see that we now have this transaction date search, okay? We can set it to your current calendar year, the current period, last 7 days. Maybe you've got a ton of transactions and you wouldn't want to see anything more than the last 7 days because it just, it loads so slow. We can go up to the last 365 days. So I'm going to stick with the last 60 days. That's a pretty good, range to be in here. And when we come to item maintenance, I'm going to pull up that item. I'm going to go to transactions, and you can see that it's actually even telling us, this is showing me the last 60 days, okay? We can still come here and edit that and make that change, but it is giving us that default to start with. Super helpful if you have a ton of transactions and it takes forever to load. Also helpful if you maybe don't have a ton of transactions, but you really need to see the total history of this item, and you always want to see that history. Great new feature with 2021, definitely something to look into. All right, so I'm going to take a sip of coffee here. Before getting into Sage 100 buttons. So throughout the Sage system, there are a ton of different buttons. And what do they mean? What do they do? I always like to go through this in the Sage basics because, either we forget or you just don't use a button very often. It's hard to remember that. What are they? The first one on this list, I hope everybody is pretty familiar with because you're finding it everywhere in the system. This is our magnifying glass. This implies that there's a lookup field, and it accesses that advanced lookup engine, which allows us to create custom lookups. Those custom lookups can be used for anything from, creating a bit of data that you want to export out of the system into Excel and use for mailers, or, for creating a list of work to be done. So I have often seen people use the magnifying glass custom lookup in sales order to show me, what orders are still in the system that need to be dealt with, what orders, haven't been printed and still need to be vetted. So magnifying glass, it's everywhere. You're going to find it everywhere. It's a lookup. The next icon here is going to be our new record button. So when we're creating a new customer, when we're creating a new sales order, a new invoice, you'll see this. We click the button, it pulls the next number based on what's set up in the options of whatever module you're in. Maybe it's sales order, maybe it's customer. We've got our first, previous, next, and last. This would go to the first record within anything that we are. One previous, one next, and to the last record. Pretty straightforward. Nobody needs me to go much more into that. The memo button, however, I think is a cool one that maybe not everybody thinks about all the time. Throughout the system, you're going to see this little notebook. This allows us to set up a memo that's associated with whatever topic, whatever screen or function that we're in. So with the customer record, for example, there's a memo, and that memo is related to the customer. However, there's also a memo that can be related to a sales order, and that would be the sales order specific and not just the customer record. When you see the memo icon in bright yellow, that means that there are memos that exist for whatever topic we're in. So if you click the little yellow button, it's going to take us out to that memo, and you can kind of review that. Anywhere that you have a blue underline, it takes you to a related task. So for this example here, it's the salesperson. You click the underlined blue, and it'll take you to salesperson maintenance. Again, you're going to see this throughout the system, all over the place. Good thing to know when you're trying to set up, maybe, oops, I've got the wrong salesperson, or there's something spelled wrong. Click the button, fix it, and go back. Our calculator button is going to be available on most number fields. So if you're in cash receipts, for example, and you're putting in the balance for a customer, you can click the calculator button, punch in the different numbers that you want to add up, maybe. And then if you hit the return key, it will actually return the value in the calculator to the field that you're calculating in. So that's kind of a cool one. You'll see these two arrows here, and this implies a change view. It allows us to swap to an alternate view or an alternate analysis. I'm actually going to show you this one because it is pretty cool. So if we come to the history tab here, you'll see we've got this little button that allows us to switch the view. When we switch the view, it takes us to sales versus sales prior year. And if I go back, you can see it's sales, cost of sales with profit analysis. Just look for this button everywhere throughout the system. You're going to find lots of really, interesting data, different data that you can look up from there. Our drill down. So anywhere we see the three arrows going down, that takes us into the detail of a related record. If we're on the invoice screen, for example, that's going to take us into the invoice history and allow us to, see the invoice detail of that record. Our binoculars, I showed you this on the last slide when we were talking about the inventory. It is a selection criteria. So when the binoculars are red, that implies that a selection criteria already exists, with the exception of inventory, because that's a default thing. So when we looked at the inventory record, you would have noticed that the binoculars were not red, but anywhere else that you have that selection, it would show that. Our flashlight button shows us records that are already created or in process. So if you're doing cash receipts, for example, you go into your cash receipts and you want to see not the customers that are available to be paid, but the cash receipts you've already entered. We're going to click that flashlight button and you'll see what's already in for cash receipts. The last button here, Excel. pretty straightforward. On a lot of our magnifying glass lookup screens, we'll have the ability for this Excel button. It allows us to export it to a sheet where we can do further analysis, where we can do a mail merge, where we can do all different kinds of things. So this is just a little bit of an overview of some of the Sage buttons. Another very exciting screen here, Sage 100 hotkeys. But if you don't know the hotkeys, you don't get to take advantage of just using your keyboard for all of your data processing. Some of these are pretty straightforward. Tab and enter, moving you to the next field or the next logical field. Spacebar, which clears a checkbox or radio button. Backspace deletes the entry. Escape closes the current window. Some of these are pretty straightforward. Where I want to come down is where we get to some of these F tasks. So if we press F1, it's going to display the help text for the current field that we're in. And actually one that I noticed isn't on this list is F2. F2 is one of my favorite things. If we are in a field and we press the F2 button, it's going to access the advanced lookup engine. So if I come over here to customer maintenance and I start typing in something, so I say 01, and then I press F2, it pulls up my customer list box from the magnifying glass with only those customers starting with 01. If I just press the magnifying glass, you can see we've got 01 and 02. So F2 button gives us that lookup box without having to actually take your mouse and press the button. F5 toggles between our primary and secondary grids. And I'm going to show you this in a little bit, the primary and secondary grids. It's a really great way for you to navigate through your, different screen. So we're going to be sharing the PowerPoint for this. You guys can look through this and see if there's any hotkey that you miss or that would really work for you. But I'm going to go ahead and move to the next. So primary versus secondary grid. We did talk about this, and I'm going to show you this a little bit more, kind of play with this. So we're going to open up sales order entry. I'm going to pull up any order, not drag it all the way off the screen here. We've got all of our header information here. This is pretty straightforward. But if we come to our lines, we have what's called the primary grid and the secondary grid. Okay. So the primary grid shows us whatever information, there's a default, right? But we can make changes to this to modify this to exactly what we want. So let's say I really want to have the description up by the item code. I'm just dragging and dropping. And now our item code and description are right next to each other. And maybe I don't need to see the warehouse. I'm going to drag and drop and remove that from the screen. Each user has the ability to change their primary or secondary grid, but also, and I'm going to be showing you some of this in an upcoming slide here, with Custom Office, we can default the primary and secondary grid to whatever fields we want really to be showing within the system. So just remember, drag and drop, primary to secondary. And there is another way that we can modify this screen so that the primary and secondary are a little bit more visible. You remember this button? This is our arrows changing our view. This allows us to have the primary grid to the left and the secondary grid to the right. So if there's a lot of information that you want to see about each of the items, we can change this view and allow us to see more of the secondary grid within this. So let's talk a little bit about Custom Office. Custom Office is a function within Sage that allows us to do all different kinds of things. We can create user-defined fields. So let's say that you have, a field that you want to put on your customer that doesn't really have a good place. Maybe it is a, a label for this customer, right? We can use Custom Office to create that user-defined field. And if if you had one that you needed on your sales order, for example, we can have that go from the data entry all the way through to the history of that record. We can also create user-defined tables. User-defined tables allow us to create lists that can be referenced in other places. We can create scripts for custom processes. This is the beginning of one down at the bottom, you can see. This is definitely something you would want to work with us on. User-defined scripts are not super simple unless you have, experience with VBScript and all of that. But if there's anything that you are looking to do that you're just not sure, you'd like to automate it and there are rules behind it, let's talk. Maybe we can create a custom script for you. The newer versions here actually, and this is actually kind of a cool thing, it can defer the creation and update until a set time. So you can say, I'm going to start creating the user-defined fields here, but to complete them, I don't need to get all users out at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. I can set it to update at 3 a.m. when, theoretically, all of your users should be out of Sage, and I really hope they are, because that's a good practice. And so that you don't have to worry about forcing people out in the middle of the day, you can set it to a timer, basically. I do want to just quickly look at the user-defined field setup and kind of show you guys what that looks like. Again, if you're setting up a user-defined field, it's not a bad idea for you to reach out to us and we can kind of help you with it. Okay, so one of the reasons that, it's good to reach out to us is, what's the table? Sage has a ton of different tables. And what's the right place that I want to put this? Well, I've been doing this long enough. I know customer master is where I want to be. And I'm just clicking through some things here. We can click plus to add a new field. We're going to give it a name. And then we're going to have this be a manual entry. Really what I want to show you is on the next screen, and it's our ability to do different types of fields. So we have a multi-line field. This is an open format field. So we can put anything that we want in there. It's just an open format field. We can have a drop box. That drop box would bring information from a list. And the same thing with a list box. The difference between the two is how they function within the screen. So, either free format field, or we've got a list of things, or our last option here is a checkbox. So the checkbox allows us to say either, check it for yes, leave it unchecked for no. We can do all different kinds of things with our free format text. We can make it all uppercase. We can center the text. It can be a string field, a numeric field, or a date. And this this could be really useful. Like maybe within your customer, you get a specific type of form signed off by them. It's some kind of acceptance form. And you want to say, what's the date that I got that form, and be able to track that and keep track of it. We can make it a date field. Under validation, this is where we can actually say, this is my list of items that are allowable within this field. So pretty neat. We can also reference a user-defined table if one exists, and we can make this a required field or not a required field. So Custom Office, the takeaway here, super, super powerful tool. If you find that there's information that's related to things you already have in Sage, but doesn't have a place in Sage, let us know. We can come up with a plan to utilize Custom Office to gather that data and relate it to what is currently in your Sage 100 software. Another really cool thing we can do within Custom Office as a module is our customizer. Customizer is a little bit, easier to use than Custom Office. So I'm going to show this a little bit more as well. Customizer allows us to modify any screen that we have within Sage 100, or almost any screen anyways. So we can come up to this customizer selection, we can select tables, but I'm going to show you a super simple way to get to the customizer right within, customer maintenance as an example. So we're in customer maintenance. We don't even need to pull up a customer, but maybe we've decided we're just not going to be doing credit holds or credit limits anymore. We really don't need to see that information. I just want to get rid of it. We want to find this kind of blank space here underneath the main tab, right click, and go to Panel Settings, Customizer. When we're creating our new customized panel, we can choose, do I want to have this for all users? Do I want to have it for all companies? Is it for a specific company? Is it just something I want to see? I'm going to go ahead and create it for all users, but not all companies, just for the ABC company here. I'm going to just drag these over here. So this brings us to our customizing, formatting panel. We can see these are the credit hold fields. If we single click on them, it references them down here, and we can right click to access additional tasks related to it. So this happens to be a checkbox. We could say, the checkbox is on the right. I really want it to be on the left. We can move the checkbox over to the left. Super simple. In this instance, what we really want to do is hide it. We don't care. We don't want to see credit hold. We're not doing credit holds. Okay. So we just check this box to say I want to hide it. I'm going to also do that with this box, which is a credit check box. We're going to hide it. And then I'm going to show you the results. So it is asking me to save as I close out here. And then I can open up customer maintenance. And you can see the credit hold box is gone. So this is just one example of how you can use Customizer. I've had people put on their own little notes here, like they'll put in text in red that says, don't forget to, set a primary contact. Or you can, create a new box. You can see sort of the outline of this box here. You can create that new box and, put user-defined fields in it, or put whatever it is that you want in it. Some of the limitations to keep in mind: if the standard fields are on another panel, for example, if it's like on the additional panel here, it's not super easy to get them over to a different panel. You kind of have to work with that a little bit. And if you are trying to do something like that, let us know. We can probably assist. Okay. Other things we can do with Customizer, we can actually create our own tabs. So I've got clients who have a lot of user-defined fields, and they really wanted to organize them on their own tabs. We can create a whole new tab over here and populate that with whatever information that we need. We can move things around on the screen. So, we can hide that, but maybe we wanted to move the credit limit up here. And the other thing that we can do is change our tab stops. So if we are hitting the tab button through here, I could set it so that residential doesn't come up as part of the tab stop, because I'm never going to use that. That's not a field that I use. Okay. So Custom Office, Customizer, super, super powerful tools that are available to you. Just think about where you might be able to use this within your system to, gather data that you're doing outside of the system, to just better improve your daily, processing, all of that. All right. The next one I'm going to talk about here are default settings. So within some of our entry fields within Sage, we can set default settings. I'm just going to close one of my windows here. pull up Sage again, and we're going to look at our sales order entry. We can choose before we select an order. So if I go ahead and select an order, you'll notice that the defaults box goes away. But before I select an order, we can choose defaults, and we can choose default information when we're creating our orders to go with. So this is a great example where we could say, okay, I'm doing a whole bunch of orders, but I really need the ship date to all be, the 22nd. I'm going to create all of these orders, but I don't want to have to change every single order to a different ship date or different warehouse. By setting these defaults, now we can just go ahead and create a new order, and you can see the ship date is defaulting to 10/22. Now, keep in mind, this is a shared setting. So I believe that this would, function for everybody doing sales order entry. But a lot of you, you've got one person doing a whole bunch of stuff all at once, set those defaults, and it can just make a few less clicks for you to do every single time you create a sales order. Audit tracking. This is a really great feature. So within our customer, vendor, or item maintenance screens, we have the ability to do some audit tracking. And if you have payroll, this would also be applicable for the employee record as well. I need to add that in there. So the audit report shows us who made the last edit to a screen. What did they make? What edit change did they make? And when did they make it? So I'm going to show you this within the customer record because I've got an example of that. So if we come to accounts receivable, reports, customer audit report. So I'm going to go ahead and just preview this to show you what it looks like. So we can see here the, this customer had a change to the field address line 2, and it was changed from suite 100 to suite 1001. This is going to be for any of your static fields, so customer, vendor, item. So that's great. We can kind of see who did what and when did they do it. But for any of your data entry fields, it's a little, we don't have a full audit trail of that. So just kind of keep that in mind. This is super, super useful though, when you want to see, hey, who changed this customer's terms? They really shouldn't have changed their terms, and maybe you need to, correct that. Once we close out of the report, it asks us, do you want to purge the audit file? It is something probably a good idea to occasionally purge the audit file, otherwise it gets really big. Think about how often you change things in customer, item, how often you add or delete items, customers, etc. It's going to bulk up that file pretty big. For right now, I'm going to click no. This is just my test system, so I don't really care about that. But I do want to quickly show you what we can track on data entry screens for, who made the last change. So just like when we were making changes to our customizer, if we right click, we have access to some additional information. We come to system info and we can see, what was the last modified date and who last modified it. And for that file, when was it originally created? Now, this is our test system, so it would be under this record information, but it's because, it's a test record. So let's do this. I'm going to come here. I'm going to make just a small change and then pull this up again. If we come to system info, you can see here's our last updated by, the date, and the time. So right click system info, it'll give us that last updated information. And that can be pretty useful. This is something that's new to the 2019 version and beyond. We have the ability to automatically update the daily transaction register after you perform things like your sales journal or your daily sales reports and updates. This can be good and bad. So for some people, this is a no-brainer. They don't, look at the daily transaction register. They don't look at the general ledger postings, or they don't want some of their employees to see those postings, but they still want it to happen automatically. This is done by role, by module. So you could allow automatic update in one module, but not another. The thing to consider here is that you won't, when you're doing that posting, it's not going to pop the report up. You're not going to see the general ledger postings. And so you want to turn this on or off accordingly. However, if you are auto posting it, it will go to Paperless Office as long as you have set the daily transaction register in that module up to go to Paperless Office. So that is a really good thing. We will see, that it goes out there and you have a PDF copy of it. It can reduce some clicks, if you have users who are posting daily sales reports out of sales order multiple times a day, it can reduce those clicks down a little bit, and that's super helpful. All right, sip of coffee. My throat's getting a little dry here. This is something I do like to point out to folks because it does come up, often enough that I think it's worth it. We have the ability to rebuild our sort files. So what are the sort files? Sort files in Sage are calculated fields that, take information from other tables to come up with a number. A really good example of this is in inventory, where you have your, on sales order, on purchase order, all of that information down in that bottom grid. These fields can get themselves confused sometimes. So, maybe done a credit or there was some kind of interruption or something, the fields are not correct, and those fields are not correct. Rebuilding sort files can correct those issues with those calculated fields. You're really not taking any risk. Again, it's just a calculation field. So, pretty straightforward. We want to make sure that we're only rebuilding our sort files and not the key files. Key files are a totally different thing and definitely have a little bit more of, risk involved. And we want to make sure when we're rebuilding that we are rebuilding in a proper order. So you got to think about how the modules all speak to each other. First, at the lowest level, we have our production modules, things like bill of materials. We can rebuild those sort files. And then maybe we want to rebuild, sales order and purchase order. That's the next level. Then inventory, then accounts payable, receivable, and then finally general ledger. So make sure to rebuild them sort of from the bottom up. When you're rebuilding each of the different modules, you'll get pop-ups saying like, would you like to recalculate the vendor balances? Would you like to recalculate, warehouse value on hand, that kind of thing? Just go ahead and click yes, because all this is doing is looking at other tables data and redoing a calculation. Pretty safe, pretty straightforward. Aha. This is a really cool one, new to version 2021. I tried to spread out some of the new features here in 2021 so that I didn't, give away all the cool new features in the beginning and then everybody got really bored towards the end. So here we go. Here's another new 2021 feature. The reverse check run in accounts payable. So this is something I think that's been requested for quite a long time, because prior to this, reversing checks was a very manual process. You would have to, do a void check one by one within, the AP module, and it just could take a ton of time. They've now added this reverse check run, and I'm going to go ahead and I'm not going to go all the way through, but I will show you guys what that looks like. Under our utilities menu, reverse check run. We can choose to pull up by a bank code and a check number, or we need to have our source journal and a register number. Okay. Generally speaking, I think the bank code and check number is easier. We get actual drop downs where we can, discover what was out there, what is available. So if I select the bank code A and I come down and I select, we're gonna try this one. Oh, look, I've already reversed this one because I've been playing a lot with this reverse check run feature. So I've selected bank code A and that check. It shows us the checks that are involved in that run and also their status. These have already been reversed. So let's do a different one. I think I know this one. This pulls up a checklist that says, okay, these ones are available to be reversed. And I don't know, for some reason, this one has invalid detail. So we can go ahead and select this. We're going to go ahead and reverse the checks that are available in this run. When we click proceed, what's going to happen is it will create a record up here in our, I believe it's in the manual check. And it will create that reversal. And then you need to go and, check it before posting it. So it doesn't automatically post it, which is a good thing. You always want to go back, check, did everything look correct after we hit that proceed? So all of these just show, 2 checks, but even though I know I've already reversed these ones, but I'm going to show you this. This is where it comes in handy, right? We've got a whole list of checks and you would have to do all of them in this check run, all of them manual. That's such a pain. This allows us to create that reversal and it kind of tells us what are the results down here. Again, I've been playing a lot with this, so my test data is all mucked up, but you kind of get the idea of how that reverse check run is going to work. Here's another one that I think is really useful for folks, the AR clear payments today. So when you're doing your cash receipts, you might notice that you have an invoice that shows as unpaid in the customer record on customer maintenance, but it doesn't show up for you to select in the cash receipt screen. I think that, they have finally figured out that the reason that this occurs is you start a cash receipt and you select those invoices and then you cancel out, and some series of events makes it so that that particular check says that it's being paid today. That paid today field allows you to, if you are doing cash receipts and somebody else is doing cash receipts, you're not both going to try to pay the same check, because as soon as somebody selects it for payment, it's checking this box, paid today. I'm going to pay it today. Okay. This utility actually corrects the issue of being, paid today. So in Sage, we come to File, Run, and we can type in that ARWAR4. Okay, this pulls up the Clear Payments Today utility, and you can just run this through. It'll correct it, and you'll be good to go creating that cash receipt again. It's really best if no cash receipts are in progress, and you may have restrictions based on people being in AR, other related modules. So you just want to keep that in mind when you're doing these utility clears. That can be, you may need to have users out of the system to proceed. In newer versions, there is a different program name for this. I believe it's like AR_open or clear paid today, something like that. So there is a different name, and that's something that you can check with us. We can share that. I did not pull that out for this because I have been doing the ARWAR4 utility for 15 years at my other company and then here. So it's been a long time running. All right. And I think I might have run through everything pretty quickly here, which is actually pretty cool because I think we're going to have some extra time for questions, because this is my last slide to show you guys paperless office errors. So paperless office, we get these errors a lot, right? Every time there's a Windows update, it seems like the paperless office converter gets knocked out, right? So here's a few tips and tricks to kind of run through now to try and fix them on your own before you give us a call. So first things first, if we come to File Run, we've got our PL _ advanced options _ UI. Just type this all in and we click OK. It's going to pull up our advanced options screen for paperless office. The first thing I always like to make sure to do is uncheck these boxes. We don't want to use the lock file. We don't want to automatically install the converter. So I uncheck the boxes and click OK. We're going to go to File Run again. And what we can do from here is test our converter. You can see when we test it and it's working properly, we get this test screen. Congratulations, it's working and it's properly installed. But let's say when you click test, you got an error. What we can do is first uninstall the converter and then install the converter and then test. This is a really, really simple, straightforward way to give yourself a quick test and try to fix these errors without having to call us and maybe wait and, oh, everything is really stressful because nothing can post. And nobody likes that. We all, want to be moving on with our day. It's a busy, fast-paced environment. One other thing about paperless office that I do want to mention is that with I believe it's with the 2021 version, they actually released a new PDF converter driver. And that PDF converter driver is less prone to being knocked out by Windows updates. So if this is something you run into really, really frequently, it's not a bad idea to, think about upgrading to kind of solve this issue. All right. And yeah, so I guess that kind of takes me to the last slide here. I know that Sage Basics usually has quite a lot of questions, so I'm okay with having a little bit of extra time here for questions, and I'm going to let Kelly kind of open that up and manage that.
Absolutely. So here's a great question. How often do you recommend upgrading the Sage software?
Great. So how often do we recommend upgrading? I guess what I'm going to do is stop my share and share my video again so you guys get to see my face as we kind of talk through these last questions. So how often do we recommend upgrading? I would say at the very least every 3 years. So the Sage 100 software is, the maintenance is supported for the previous 3 versions. So it's like the current version and 2 more, right? So for example, the 2018 version just went out of support because we have 2019, 2020, and 2021. So it's really a good idea to do that. In some circumstances, nothing is going to change for you except access to these new features. But best practice to stay up to date on your software. One of the big things is if you are on an older version of the software and you call into Sage support, they are most likely going to tell you, you're on an old version, we can't even talk to you. You really need to, upgrade before we can try and fix any issue you have.
All right. So next question is, how do I get out of Classic View?
Aha, how do I get out of Classic View? Okay, so to show you this, I'm going to have to do a couple of things, because in 2021, Classic View is no longer available. So I need to exit out of this one, and I'm going to open up my good old trusty 2019 version and show you guys. So If you are in 2019 version and back, you can do this. If you are not, you need to contact a consultant and we can help you through it. There's like a backdoor way to fix it. But if you are in 2019 and back, you can come up here to your change user settings and we can change our desktop from classic to standard. Okay.
Jesse, you want to share your screen?
Shoot, sorry. All right, let me do that again. All right, Sage 2019. We come right here to change user settings and we can choose classic or standard. Now you'll notice when I select classic and click accept, nothing happens, right? It's because we need to close out and reopen for the classic view to come into play. So again, here's our classic, and to change it back, change user settings, classic to standard, click accept and close out. Okay. Great question.
All right, next question. Will you go over Paperless Office one more time?
Sure. So fixing the Paperless Office errors.
Yes.
So for Paperless Office, you might get those errors that say, error code 30 or, something, and it's really clear that the Paperless Office converter is no longer working. File, run, PL_advanced options _UI. And this is also listed in the PowerPoint, which we're going to share out to everybody. So don't feel like you have to frantically scribble that down. It's gonna, you'll get the link. Once we click that, it opens up our Paperless Office Advanced Options window. First thing to check, make sure these two boxes are unchecked. We do not want to have them checked. And then if you're getting these errors, we can test the converter to see what the error is. If you get an error, uninstall the converter. So just click the button to uninstall and it just runs through a really quick window. I'm not going to do it because I don't want to mess it up, but uninstall it and then click install and it'll go ahead and do the reinstall. Usually just uninstalling and reinstalling fixes those Paperless Office errors that you get.
All right. How about, can you change the font color in specific fields? If so, how do you do this?
Ooh. I don't know. Let's find out. So if we were able to do this, we're going to come to our panel settings, customizer. I'm going to go ahead and customize this one. Gosh, that's a really good question. I know you can have colored font for fields that you're creating on your own, but let's see if we can change the font for our credit limit. Yes, look at that. That's pretty cool. So what we did to get here, we came into the customizer for that particular panel. We right click on a field and it pulls up our ability to make edits to these fields. For here, we can just go to and change the text color. It looks like we can also change and have a different background. Maybe we want to do like that. So you can really make it, like 3D vision here with the blue and red. So I've never actually played with this very much, but that is a really kind of neat thing. I know we can also do, we can create it in italics, we can underline it, that kind of thing. Be careful with the underlining and with making it in blue so that you don't get yourself confused and think that it's a hyperlink when it's not actually a hyperlink. But that's a really cool question. Thank you for whoever brought that up. I like it.
All right, that's actually all the questions.
Oh, wow. Okay.
But don't feel like you can't still ask questions. You all have
That's
Jesse's email address, I'm sure.
Mm-hmm.
Perfect. All right. Well, if there are no more questions.
I see one more. Hang on one sec.
Sorry about that.
No, that's okay. I see a few under Q&A versus chat.
Ah, sneaky.
Yes.
All right. What causes the issues with the calculated field?
Yeah. Okay. This is a little bit, loosey-goosey, so bear with me because I think sometimes we know and sometimes we don't, right? Let's say you have an interruption. So maybe somebody is doing a task and at the moment that they're updating it, there's, like power loss or something happens. Somebody's updating something at the same time. That causes a little bit of like time confliction and can cause an issue with that calculated field. Sometimes it's starting an entry and then backing out of it because the calculation happens at a moment, that you've started the entry and it's starting to kind of calculate that, but then you say, oh, wait, no, never mind. I'm going to like delete this or I'm going to back out of it. That can also cause some of those calculations. It really depends on, what field it is, what, and what circumstances surround it. So the nice thing is with that rebuild of the sort files, it corrects it and there really isn't any drawback to it, right? It's just recalculating those fields and it can be just a good thing to do on an occasional basis.
All right, next question. Is there a way to change the default dates in Paperless Office? For example, if I'm viewing customer invoices in Paperless Office, it defaults to a month ago. How can I change that to default it to today's date?
That is a great question. I'm not sure you can, at least in this version. Yeah, I don't think that you can. So possibly, I would guess in future versions, this may be something that changes. So a lot of the things within Sage that are date-based are based on the current period within modules, right? But we've seen with inventory that is changing, right? They're changing that transaction to allow you guys to make more decisions about what you want to see on your screen and not. I don't think that's translated to Paperless Office yet. I will be happy to look at it a little bit more, but I'm not sure that that's something we're going to be able to fix. I will make a note though and see if I can find a better answer for you on that.
All right, next question. What is the point of the lock file on the PL_advanced options _ UI?
Can I give the sassy answer? The point is to cause me tons of trouble. When we use the lock file, I think there must have been a point to it at some point, probably related to, sharing printers and like the way that, okay, so if you print to Paperless Office, it's going to like lock the file so that nobody else can bump in ahead of you or whatever. But because of the speed of printers these days, because of the, just speed of connection, that is really obsolete. And the lock file just really causes a bunch of issues versus not. So if it is something real specific, that you're asking this about, that like you think the lock file might solve something for you, let's talk a little bit more. I guess I just think it always causes problems. So.
All right, next question. Sometimes my Sage locks up, and if I close it in Task Manager, then attempt to reopen Sage, I get a message that a desktop has already been created for the user. So I have to completely shut down my computer and restart. Is that typical?
Yes. Yeah, that is typical. So if your Sage is locked up and you close it using Task Manager, there's still a task process running in the background that thinks that you are using Sage. There is a different way that you can unlock that if you're in the Task Manager, but I get, unfortunately, if your Sage has locked up, there's not a whole lot you can do except for close it out in Task Manager. Certainly, the next time that happens to you, if you want to give us a call, we can have a consultant work with you and show you where you close it in Task Manager, but to look for another thing, there's another thing in your Task Manager that you can also close that will prevent you from having to reboot your computer, right? So just give us a call and we can go. I don't want to share that here because like I don't want people to start going willy-nilly into their task manager and shutting things down. But we'll be happy to show you.
So next question, how to run different GL accounts at the same time?
I'm not sure what that means, I guess, how to run different GL accounts at the same time. If you're looking for reporting, you know, you've got your financial reports out of the GL module. But I guess I'm not really sure what that question refers to.
I will take a note here
Okay.
and we'll contact you to get a little more information there. Next question, how do we send a customer via email all of their open invoices in PDF from Paperless or otherwise?
That's a really good question. I think there's a way to do this in Paperless. I may not be able to dig and figure that out right this second. But I'm guessing what it has to do, what we would do here is use our binoculars to filter. So we would filter and select the customer, and then we would select all of those records. And I think this button right here is the resend. So that's something I can look into and give a better instruction. I don't know that I've had anybody do that, but that doesn't mean that you shouldn't. That sounds like a really cool thing to be able to do. So I can look into that a little bit further.
All right, next question. I have a question regarding reversing checks. We have the 2019 version. Can we do that in this version? If so, would this replace the process of going back to the manual check and payment entry and typing in the check number? And it asks if this is a check reversal.
Gotcha. So you're in the 2019 version. The answer is no, unfortunately. That feature became available in the 2021 version. So it's really, really new. But when you upgrade to the 2021 version, yes, this replaces that process of going to manual check and payment entry, typing in the check, ask if it's a check reversal. It creates all those records for you by running the utility. So once you get to that upgraded version, that feature is going to become available for you and save you a whole bunch of time.
Okay, that is all of the Sage related questions. We did have somebody ask what model of headset that we're using. They really like it. But we do too. Huge fans. It's called a Yammy, Y-A-M-A-Y, and we got them on Amazon. So yeah, easy. The whole team has them.
Yep. Love it.
All right. I think that's it for questions. Unless anybody has any others.
That's great. Thank you guys so much. These are incredible questions, and you know, I love to see so much engagement. I know tips and tricks are, you know, I think everybody pretty much gets something out of it every time, and I hope you guys did today. Hope you got at least one thing, maybe a couple of things, even if it was small, that make your life a little bit easier.
All right. I'd like to thank Jessie for putting together this amazing presentation today, and a huge thank you to you, our valued clients, for taking time out of your day and being a part of our annual user conference. Lastly, this conference really could not be possible without our valued business partners who sponsor this event. So make sure to check out our website. We have a business partner hall available that'll be up tomorrow morning, I believe, and our website is v-bcc.com. Thank you all and have a great day.
Thanks.